I stepped out of the black diplomatic car, my heels clicking against the marble floor of the Grand National Hotel, and that's when I saw them. My family. Standing in the reception line with the other dignitaries' relatives dressed in their finest clothes, wearing practiced smiles. They were here to greet the new ambassador. Me. They didn't recognize me. My mother's eyes skated right over me, searching for someone more important. My father checked his watch, impatient. And Elena, beautiful, perfect Elena, was adjusting her designer dress the same way she always did when she wanted attention. 10 years. 10 years since they'd shipped me off like unwanted cargo, and they couldn't even recognize the girl they'd sacrificed to save their precious golden child. Ambassador Chen, the foreign minister said, gesturing toward the receiving line, allow me to introduce some of our distinguished guests. I smiled, the kind of smile I'd perfected in boardrooms and negotiation chambers across 3 continents. Of course. As I approached, I watched my mother's face. I watched the exact moment she started to register something familiar in my features. The color drained from her cheeks, my father went rigid. Elena's mouth fell open, her carefully applied lipstick suddenly garish against her pale face. Ambassador Chen, the foreign minister continued, oblivious to the family drama unfolding before him. This is Mr. Chen Wei and his family. They're prominent business owners in the city. Chen, my father croaked. Ambassador Chen? I extended my hand, letting the diamonds on my wrist, a gift from the Prime Minister of Switzerland, catch the light. Mr. Chen, how lovely to meet you. Though I suppose we're technically related, aren't we? I'm your daughter, the one you sent away 10 years ago to clean up someone else's mess. The foreign minister's eyebrows shot up. My mother made a small, wounded sound. But I had waited 10 years for this moment, and I was going to savor every second. 10 years ago, I was 20 years old, a junior at the prestigious National University, studying international relations with dreams of working for the United Nations. I wasn't the favorite child. That honor had always belonged to Elena, 3 years my senior, who had everything: beauty, charm, our parents' unconditional love, and a trust fund that could feed a small country. I had scholarships, I had secondhand textbooks, I had a part-time job at the library that paid for my meals because the money my parents gave me barely covered rent in the cheapest dormitory on campus. But I didn't mind. I was good at being invisible, at surviving on scraps while Elena basked in the spotlight. I'd learned early that making myself small meant less abuse, fewer comparisons, less disappointment in my parents' eyes when they looked at me and clearly wished I was more like her. The scandal broke on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in Professor Liu's office discussing my thesis on diplomatic immunity in international conflicts when my phone started buzzing. Once, twice, 15 times. I apologized and checked it. 37 missed calls from my mother, 20 from my father, and a barrage of texts from Elena that ranged from pleading to threatening. I need to take this, I said, and Professor Liu nodded, concerned. I stepped into the hallway and called my mother back. She didn't even say hello. You need to come home. Now, the press is outside. Your father's having a breakdown. Elena is, her voice cracked. Just come home. The taxi ride felt like descending into hell. When I arrived at our family's sprawling estate in the western suburbs, news vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions that made my stomach churn. Something about embezzlement, about fraud, about Elena Chen, rising star at the Ministry of Commerce, being investigated for stealing government funds and funneling them into a private account. The servants let me in through the back entrance. I found my family in my father's study, my parents looking haggard, Elena sobbing dramatically on the leather sofa. Finally, my mother snapped when she saw me. Where have you been? At school. What's happening? My father looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, calculation mixed with something like hunger. We need your help, Yue. Yue. My name sounded foreign in his mouth. He usually called me the other one, or didn't call me at all. Elena lifted her tear-stained face. Even crying, she was beautiful. It's all a misunderstanding. Someone set me up. They used my login credentials to move the money. I would never. Elena made a mistake, my mother interrupted smoothly. A clerical error, but you know how the media is. They're turning it into something ugly. I looked between them, understanding slowly dawning. How much money are we talking about? 8 million yuan, my father said quietly. I sat down heavily. 8 million yuan, nearly 1.2 million US dollars. That wasn't a clerical error. That was systematic theft. The thing is, my father continued, the investigation is focusing on Elena specifically, her name, her position, her credentials. If we could muddy the waters. What your father means, my mother said, her voice taking on that saccharine tone she used when she wanted something, is that you look remarkably similar to Elena. And you both work in the university system. You both have access to government databases through your research positions. If we suggested that perhaps there was confusion about which Chen daughter was involved, the words hung in the air like poison gas. You want me to take the blame, I said flatly. Not the blame, Elena said quickly, sitting up. Just create reasonable doubt. You're nobody, Yue. No offense, but you don't have a career yet, not really. You're just a student. But I'm up for a major promotion. I'm getting married to Vice Minister Zhao's son next year. This scandal could ruin everything. You're asking me to confess to embezzling 8 million yuan. We're asking you to be vague, my mother corrected. To say you had access to the same systems. To admit that maybe you and Elena shared passwords. To look confused when they ask questions. Prosecutors love confused witnesses. It creates reasonable doubt. And in return, I asked, though I already knew the answer. My father's eyes slid away from mine. We'll take care of you. Make sure you're comfortable. We'll send you abroad, my mother added. To study, America, England, wherever you want. Full tuition, living expenses. Think of it as a gap year, just a little longer. By the time you come back, this will all have blown over. I looked at Elena, who had stopped crying and was now watching me with calculating eyes. This was the sister who had borrowed my prize-winning essay in high school and submitted it as her own. Who had stolen my boyfriend when I was 16 by telling him I was cheating on him. Who had convinced our parents to give her my college fund because she needed it more for her master's degree. And now she wanted me to take the fall for embezzlement. No, I said. My mother's face hardened. Excuse me? I said no, I'm not doing this. Elena committed a crime. She should face the consequences. The room erupted. My mother shouted about family loyalty. Elena called me selfish, heartless, jealous. My father just looked disappointed, which somehow hurt more than the anger. If you don't help your sister, my mother said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, you are no longer part of this family. Do you understand me? We will cut you off completely. No more tuition payments. No more allowance. No more family name to protect you. The family name? I laughed bitterly. You've never let me use it. I've always been the spare, the backup, the one you only acknowledged when you needed something. Think very carefully about what you're saying, my father warned. I thought about it. I thought about 20 years of being second best, of watching Elena get everything while I got scraps, of being told to be grateful for whatever meager affection they threw my way. I've thought about it. My answer is still no. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that my mother had already set the backup plan in motion. The next morning, I woke up in a hotel room with no memory of how I got there. My head pounded, my mouth tasted like copper, and when I checked my phone, I had 200 notifications. The headlines were everywhere. Second Chen daughter confesses to embezzlement scheme. University student admits stealing millions. Elena Chen cleared as sister takes blame. There was a video. Grainy, dark, but unmistakably me, or someone who looked like me. Sitting in what appeared to be a police station, slurring words about accessing government accounts, about stealing money, about Elena being innocent. I called my mother immediately. She answered on the first ring. What did you do? I demanded. What needed to be done? The video is quite convincing, isn't it? One of your father's friends at the film studio did excellent work with the editing and the actress. That's fraud. That's illegal. And who's going to believe you? You, the troubled younger daughter with a history of jealousy toward your successful sister. The police already have your confession. The press has the story. It's done, Yue. I'll tell them the truth. I'll tell them it's fake. My mother laughed, cold and sharp. Go ahead, try. But while you're fighting this, Elena's case will move forward anyway. And when it does, we'll make sure everyone knows how you tried to frame her out of spite. We'll paint you as mentally unstable. We'll dig up every petty thing you ever did wrong. We have the resources to bury you, Yue. Don't test us. I felt the walls closing in. So what now? Now you get on a plane. We've arranged for you to attend graduate school in England. Full scholarship. We made sure of that through some connections. You'll leave tonight. By the time you land, Elena will be cleared and you'll be yesterday's news. Stay away for a few years and everyone will forget the troubled Chen daughter who caused all that drama. And if I refuse, then we'll make sure the fake confession becomes a real prosecution. We have enough fabricated evidence to put you away for years. Your choice? Exile or prison? I chose exile. They put me on a plane that night. No goodbyes, no apologies, just a one-way ticket to London and an acceptance letter to a graduate program I'd never applied for. I cried for the entire 13-hour flight, but somewhere over the Himalayas, as the sun rose and painted the clouds gold, something shifted inside me. The tears stopped. The grief hardened into something else, something sharp and purposeful. They thought they were sending me away to rot, to be forgotten, to disappear into obscurity while Elena lived her perfect life. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I had always been smart, smarter than Elena, though no one cared to notice. I spoke 4 languages fluently. I had a near photographic memory, and I had something Elena never had, the ability to survive with nothing. If they wanted me gone, fine, I would go, but I wouldn't disappear. I would become someone they couldn't ignore. The first year in London was brutal. The graduate program was legitimate, but cutthroat. International relations at the London School of Economics didn't tolerate mediocrity. I had no family money to fall back on. My parents had kept their word about cutting me off completely. The scholarship covered tuition but barely touched living expenses. I worked 3 jobs. I tutored Mandarin to businessmen in the mornings, translated documents for a law firm in the afternoons, and waitressed at an upscale Chinese restaurant. At night, I slept 4 hours a day. I lived on instant noodles and tea. And I excelled. I finished top of my class that first year. The second year, I won the Chancellor's Prize for my dissertation on economic diplomacy in Asia-Pacific relations. Professor Williams, my advisor, pulled me aside after the award ceremony. Ms. Chen, have you considered the diplomatic corps? Your work on trade negotiations is some of the best I've seen in 20 years of teaching. I can't go back to China, I said carefully. Family issues. He studied me with knowing eyes. I wasn't thinking of China. The UN is always looking for talented multilingual specialists. And I have friends at the Foreign Office who might be interested in someone with your particular skill set. That conversation changed everything. Professor Williams introduced me to Ambassador Patricia Morrison, a formidable woman who had spent 30 years navigating international waters. Over tea at her Kensington flat, I told her an edited version of my story: family conflict, exile, determination to build my own path. She listened without interrupting, then said, "You remind me of myself at your age. Hungry, brilliant, underestimated." She set down her teacup. "How would you feel about working for the British Foreign Office? We have a program for exceptional foreign nationals. It's a fast track to diplomatic positions, but it's grueling." "I'm familiar with grueling," she smiled. "I believe you are." I joined the Foreign Office's Asia-Pacific desk at 23. By 25, I was leading trade negotiations with emerging markets. At 27, I was appointed as the cultural attaché to the British Embassy in Singapore, the youngest person ever to hold that position. I learned how to move in diplomatic circles, how to smile at people I despised, how to negotiate deals that benefited everyone while secretly ensuring I came out ahead, how to make powerful friends and neutralize enemies before they knew they should fear me. I also learned patience. Every year, I tracked my family from afar. Elena's wedding to the vice minister's son, a lavish affair that made the society pages. My father's business expansion into real estate. My mother's chairmanship of various charity boards, always photographed at galas wearing jewels that cost more than some people's homes. And I waited. At 29, Ambassador Morrison called me into her office. She was retiring, she said, and she'd recommended me for something special. The UN is establishing a new position, Special Ambassador for Economic Development in Emerging Markets. It's a 5-year appointment, incredible visibility, direct access to heads of state. You'd be based in Geneva but traveling constantly. You'd essentially be a roving ambassador, brokering deals and resolving conflicts across Asia, Africa, and Eastern Europe. She paused. You'd be the youngest person ever appointed to a position of this level. What's the catch? No catch. You've earned this, Yue. Every commendation, every successful negotiation, every bridge you've built, they all led here. The Secretary General himself approved your appointment. She handed me a folder. But there's something else you should know. Part of your portfolio includes economic development initiatives in China. You'd be working directly with their Ministry of Commerce. My heart stopped. The Ministry of Commerce? I know about your family situation. I've always known. I did my research when I first met you. Her expression was kind but firm. This is an opportunity for you to go home, not as the exiled daughter, but as someone with power, real power. The question is, are you ready? I thought about Elena, who'd stolen 8 million yuan and let me take the fall, about my parents who'd drugged me and fabricated a confession rather than let their precious golden child face consequences, about 10 years of exile, of building myself from nothing while they enjoyed their ill-gotten peace. I'm ready. The appointment took 6 months to finalize. During that time, I prepared. I researched every business deal my father's company had made in the last decade. I tracked Elena's career. She was now a senior director at the Ministry of Commerce, ironically in charge of anti-corruption initiatives. I documented every society event my mother had attended, every charity donation that was really just money laundering, every connection they'd abused. I also reached out to some old contacts. Professor Liu, who'd advised my undergraduate thesis, was now the Dean of International Studies at National University. He remembered me fondly and was horrified when I told him the truth about what had happened. He'd always wondered why I'd suddenly disappeared. I kept your research, he told me over a video call. Your thesis on diplomatic immunity was brilliant. I've cited it in my own work. When I saw your name in the news connected to that embezzlement scandal, I couldn't believe it. It didn't match the student I knew. It wasn't true, I said. But I couldn't fight it at the time. I didn't have the resources. And now? Now I have something better than resources. I have jurisdiction. He understood immediately. You're coming back. As the UN Special Ambassador, which means diplomatic immunity, which means they can't touch me no matter how much fabricated evidence they have. I paused. Professor Liu, I need your help with something. We spent the next 3 months gathering evidence. Professor Liu had kept copies of all my original work, my essays, my research, my thesis. He also had records of Elena's plagiarism from her time as a graduate student, instances where she'd submitted work that was clearly above her capabilities, work that matched the style and depth of mine. More importantly, he still had friends in the government, friends who'd been suspicious about how quickly Elena's embezzlement case had been closed, friends who'd noticed that the investigation into me, a case that should have resulted in prosecution, had simply vanished from the records. It's all here, Professor Liu said during our final call before my appointment became official. Enough to reopen the case. Enough to prove it was Elena all along. But you'll need protection when you release it. I'll have diplomatic immunity. That protects you from prosecution. It doesn't protect you from accidents, or scandals, or your family's resources. Then it's a good thing I've learned how to fight dirty. The announcement of my appointment made international news. youngest UN Special Ambassador appointed to lead Economic Development Initiative. My photo was everywhere. Me in a tailored suit standing beside the UN Secretary General, looking confident and powerful. The photo reached China within hours. My phone, a new number they shouldn't have had, started ringing that afternoon. My mother, my father, Elena, extended family members I barely remembered, all suddenly desperate to reconnect. I let every call go to voicemail. I listened to each message once, cataloging the progression from confusion to realization to panic. My mother, Yue, is this really you? We saw the news. We're so proud. Please call us back. My father, we need to talk before you make any official visits to China. There are things you don't understand about your sister's situation. Elena, whatever you're planning, don't. You'll regret it. We can make a deal. I deleted them all and boarded my flight to Geneva to officially begin my new position. My first official act as special ambassador was to request a meeting with the Chinese Ministry of Commerce to discuss a new trade framework for sustainable development in rural provinces. The meeting was scheduled for 3 months out in Beijing, with all senior ministry officials required to attend, including Elena. I spent those 3 months laying groundwork. I met with international anti-corruption organizations and shared anonymous tips about suspicious financial activities at the Chinese Ministry of Commerce. I gave interviews about the importance of transparency in government, about how corruption poisoned economic development from the inside out. I made sure that by the time I arrived in Beijing, everyone was primed to pay attention. The Chinese government, eager to improve their international image, rolled out the red carpet. Full diplomatic reception, state dinner, the works. And because they wanted to showcase their cooperation with the UN, they invited the press to cover my arrival, which is how I ended up at the Grand National Hotel, watching my family's faces as they realized the daughter they'd thrown away had returned as someone they couldn't dismiss, couldn't ignore, and couldn't control. Ambassador Chen, my mother said, her voice artificially bright as the foreign minister moved on to introduce other guests. What a wonderful surprise. We had no idea you'd achieve such success. Didn't you? I kept my voice pleasant, professional. I sent Christmas cards every year, with updates on my career. Did they not arrive? The lie landed like a slap. We both knew I'd sent nothing. They'd cut me off completely after all. My father stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. Perhaps we could have dinner. Catch up properly. We've missed you terribly. Have you? How strange. I tried to call you for 3 years after you sent me away. You'd changed your numbers. Elena, always the actress, dabbed at her eyes. We thought it was best to give you space, to let you build your own life without our interference. The other guests were starting to notice the tension. Good. I wanted witnesses. How thoughtful, I said. And did you think it was best when you fabricated a confession video to frame me for your embezzlement? Or when you threatened to have me prosecuted if I didn't leave the country? Or was that just necessary family business? My mother's face went white. This isn't the place, isn't it? I looked around at the crowd of diplomats, business people, and journalists who were now openly staring. I think this is exactly the place. The Grand National Hotel hosting a diplomatic reception with full press coverage. Seems like the perfect venue to discuss transparency and corruption, don't you think? A reporter, sensing a story, had her phone out and recording. My father grabbed my arm. You're making a scene. Think about what you're doing. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Take your hand off me. Now. The steel in my voice made him release me immediately. 10 years ago, he could manhandle me with impunity. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was a UN special ambassador with diplomatic immunity and the power to make his life very, very difficult. Ambassador Chen, one of my aides approached, perfectly timed. The Minister of Commerce has requested a moment of your time regarding tomorrow's meeting. Of course. I turned back to my family with a smile. How lovely to see you all. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to catch up. After all, I'll be in Beijing for the next 6 months, overseeing the implementation of our new transparency initiatives. I let that sink in. In the Ministry of Commerce specifically. Elena made a small, strangled sound. Tomorrow's meeting should be particularly interesting, I continued. We'll be reviewing all senior officials' financial records as part of our corruption assessment. Standard procedure for our development funding. I do hope everyone's paperwork is in order. I walked away before they could respond, following my aide toward the Minister of Commerce, an elderly man named Wang, who had a reputation for integrity and was reportedly furious about the corruption in his ministry. Ambassador Chen, he greeted me warmly. I wanted to personally thank you for choosing our ministry for your pilot transparency program. We've needed fresh eyes on our operations for some time. I'm happy to help Minister Wang. I have a particular interest in this area. Personal reasons. His eyes sharpened. Oh? I'll explain in detail during our meeting tomorrow. But in brief, 10 years ago, 8 million yuan was stolen from a government account under your ministry's purview. The wrong person was blamed. I have evidence that proves it. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I remember that case. It was closed very quickly, too quickly. The official investigation was inadequate. Because the real perpetrator had family connections that protected her. And you have evidence? Complete documentation. Financial records, original investigative notes that were buried, testimony from officials who were pressured to alter their findings. Everything needed to reopen the case. And your interest in this? The woman who was falsely accused, the one whose life was destroyed to protect the real thief, she deserves justice. Minister Wang's expression was unreadable. This woman, the one who was falsely accused, she must have been very brave to survive such a betrayal and build a new life. She did what she had to do. He nodded slowly. I will review your evidence personally. If what you say is true, and I suspect it is, then tomorrow's meeting will be very illuminating indeed. That night, my phone exploded with messages. My family, now truly panicking, tried every approach. Threats, bribes, emotional manipulation, promises of reconciliation. I read each one clinically, noting the progression from confidence to desperation. Elena sent a video message, tears streaming down her face. Please, Yue, I made a mistake. I was young and stupid, but I've changed. I have a family now, 2 children who need their mother. If you expose me, you'll destroy their lives too. I almost felt something like pity. Almost. Then I remembered being 20 years old, watching a fabricated confession video of myself, knowing that my entire life had been stolen to protect my sister's comfort. I remembered the hunger, the exhaustion, the loneliness of those first years in exile. I remembered calling home over and over, desperate for someone to believe me, only to hear the automated message that the number was no longer in service. I deleted the video. My mother's message was more strategic. We can give you money, as much as you want. Name your price. I replied to that one. I don't want your money. I want justice. My father's message tried a different angle. If you do this, you'll be just as bad as you claim we are. You'll be using your power to destroy your own family out of spite. I typed back, you destroyed your own family when you chose to protect a thief instead of an innocent daughter. I'm just correcting the record. The next morning, I arrived at the Ministry of Commerce in full diplomatic regalia. The Satisen building was a monument to bureaucratic power, 30 stories of glass and steel in the heart of Beijing's government district. Press lined the entrance, cameras flashing as I stepped out of my car. Inside, the conference room was packed. Senior officials, financial auditors, anti-corruption investigators, and, sitting in the front row, looking like she might be sick, Elena. She'd aged in 10 years, not badly, but the stress was visible around her eyes, in the tightness of her smile. She wore an expensive suit and had her hair styled immaculately, but her hands trembled as she clutched her portfolio. Next to her sat my parents, who'd somehow secured seats at what was supposed to be a government-only meeting. My father's face was red, my mother's mouth pressed into a thin, angry line. Minister Wang called the meeting to order. Thank you all for attending. Today we're beginning a comprehensive review of our ministry's financial practices as part of the UN's Transparency Initiative. Ambassador Chen will be leading this review. I stood, activating the presentation screen behind me. Thank you, Minister Wang. Let's begin with a case study, one that exemplifies the kind of corruption we're here to eliminate. The first slide appeared. The Chen case, a study in financial fraud and institutional failure. Elena's face drained of color. 10 years ago, I began, my voice steady and professional. 8 million yuan was stolen from a government development account. The theft was sophisticated, involving insider access to secure financial systems and knowledge of audit schedules. The investigation initially identified the perpetrator correctly, a senior official with the means, motive, and opportunity to commit the crime. I clicked to the next slide, showing Elena's employee ID from 10 years ago. However, within 48 hours, the focus of the investigation shifted to a different suspect. A university student with no access to the relevant systems, no financial motive, and no history of criminal activity. My university ID appeared on screen. This shift occurred not because of evidence, but because of influence. The real perpetrator's family used their wealth and connections to fabricate a confession, threaten witnesses, and bury the truth. I clicked through a series of documents, the original investigation notes, the fabricated confession video with its digital fingerprints exposed, testimony from officials who'd been pressured to change their findings. The innocent woman was forced to flee the country. The guilty party received a promotion. Elena stood up, her voice shaking. This is absurd. You're using your position to settle a personal vendetta. Sit down, Director Chen, Minister Wang said sharply. You'll have an opportunity to respond to the evidence. What evidence? My father roared, also standing. This is a witch hunt. Our daughter Elena has served this ministry faithfully for 10 years. Your daughter Elena has been stealing from this ministry for 10 years, I interrupted calmly. That is us, and I can prove it. I clicked to the next section of my presentation. Financial records appeared, not just the original 8 million yuan, but transaction after transaction showing suspicious fund transfers, unauthorized account accesses, payments to offshore accounts. Over the past decade, Director Chen has stolen approximately 43 million yuan from various government accounts. She's gotten better at hiding it, more sophisticated in her methods, but the pattern is clear. Elena collapsed back into her chair. My mother made a wounded sound. How did you get those records, Mrs.? My father demanded. They're confidential. I'm a UN special ambassador conducting an official corruption investigation. I have access to whatever records I deem necessary, and I've deemed these very necessary indeed. Minister Wang was reviewing the documents on his tablet, his expression growing darker by the second. Director Chen, is this true? Elena opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I'll take that as a confession, Minister Wang said coldly. He turned to the security officials flanking the door. Detain Director Chen. Contact the prosecutor's office immediately. No! My mother lunged forward. You can't do this. Our family, we have connections. We'll sue. On what grounds, Agnes? I asked, finally allowing myself to smile. Diplomatic immunity protects me from any legal action. And the evidence speaks for itself. Unless you'd like to confess to your role in the cover-up, fabricating evidence, threatening witnesses, bribing officials, those are all serious crimes. My father's face had gone from red to gray. We're your family. You stopped being my family when you chose to destroy me rather than let Elena face consequences. We gave you opportunities, my mother hissed. We sent you abroad, paid for your education. You drugged me, fabricated a confession, and threatened to have me imprisoned if I didn't leave. That's not an opportunity, that's exile. After everything we did for you, everything you did for me? The words came out harder than I intended. You treated me like a servant, an afterthought, a tool to be used when convenient. You gave Elena every advantage while I fought for scraps, and when she committed a crime, you didn't hesitate to sacrifice me to protect her. So, no, you don't get to claim you did anything for me. Everything I've achieved, I achieved in spite of you. The security officials had reached Elena, were pulling her to her feet. She looked at me with something like hatred mixed with fear. "You'll regret this," she said. "My husband, his father is a vice minister. Your husband left you 3 months ago," I said almost gently, "when the rumors about your financial impropriety started circulating. I made sure they reached him through his father's office. A vice minister can't have a corrupt daughter-in-law. Bad for the career." Her face crumbled. "You planned this, all of it." "I learned from the best. You taught me that family means nothing compared to self-preservation, that you should destroy anyone who threatens your comfort. I'm just applying your lessons." As they led her away in handcuffs, my mother turned to me with pure venom in her eyes. "You've destroyed this family." "No," I said. "You destroyed this family. I'm just making sure everyone knows what you really are." The aftermath moved quickly. Elena was formally charged with embezzlement, fraud, and corruption. 43 million yuan worth of charges that would likely result in a life sentence. The prosecution also reopened the original case from 10 years ago, officially clearing my name and issuing a public apology for the mishandling of the investigation. My father's business empire began to crumble within days. His company had relied heavily on government contracts, contracts that were immediately suspended pending investigation into how he'd obtained them. It turned out that many of those lucrative deals had come through Elena's influence, through favors traded and palms greased. Without her protection and with their family name now synonymous with corruption, his partners fled and his investors pulled out. The fancy estate in the western suburbs was seized as proceeds of crime. The cars, the jewels, the art collection, all auctioned off to pay restitution to the government. My mother's position on various charity boards evaporated overnight. She became a social pariah, the woman who'd raised a corrupt daughter and then tried to frame her other daughter to cover it up. The society pages that once featured her prominently now published exposés about her role in the scandal. Professor Liu called me a week after Elena's arrest. "The university has decided to audit all of her academic work," he said. "We found 17 instances of plagiarism, including her master's thesis, which was almost entirely lifted from your undergraduate research." "What will you do?" "Revoke her degree, issue a formal apology. And if you're willing, we'd like to publish your original research under your name, properly credited this time." "I'd like that." He paused. "Yue, I'm sorry. I should have fought harder for you back then. I knew something was wrong when you disappeared. You did what you could. And you helped me when it mattered most. Still, you deserved better. I got better, eventually." The media had a field day with the story. The angle they loved most, the disgraced daughter who'd returned as a powerful ambassador to expose her family's corruption. I gave one interview to an international news network where I spoke carefully about justice, transparency, and the importance of holding powerful people accountable. The reporter asked, "Do you feel vindicated?" I considered the question. "I feel like the truth has been told. That's more important than vindication." "What about your family? Do you have any regrets about exposing them?" "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that they chose corruption and cruelty over integrity. But I don't regret seeking justice." "Will you ever reconcile with them?" I thought about my mother's venomous expression, my father's calculation, Elena's desperate tears that were more about being caught than about genuine remorse. Reconciliation requires remorse and change. They've shown neither, so no, I don't believe we will. My family tried multiple appeals, both legal and emotional. My father's lawyer argued that I'd abused my diplomatic position. The complaint was dismissed. My investigation had been conducted entirely within the scope of my authority. My mother wrote me a letter attempting to shift the blame entirely onto Elena, suggesting we could rebuild our relationship if I just forgave her role in the cover-up. I sent the letter back unopened. Elena herself sent one final message from prison just before her trial, a handwritten note that made it through diplomatic channels. "I hope you're happy now. You've destroyed everything. Was your revenge worth it? Was it worth tearing apart a family over a mistake I made 10 years ago?" I wrote back, only once. You call it revenge. I call it consequences. You stole money and let me take the blame. You ruined my life to protect your comfort. You taught me that family means nothing when there's something to gain. I learned that lesson well, and as for tearing apart the family, you did that when you chose to commit crimes and then destroy an innocent person to cover them up. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth. That's not revenge, that's justice. I never heard from her again. 6 months after Elena's conviction, I was sitting in my office in Geneva when Ambassador Morrison stopped by. She'd retired but still kept tabs on her former proteges. I heard about what happened in Beijing, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. Your family. It's been handled. I'm sure it has. She studied me with those sharp eyes. How do you feel? Tired? Satisfied? Sad, maybe. Sad? I set down my pen. I didn't want it to be true. Even after everything, some part of me hoped that maybe they'd show remorse, that maybe Elena would genuinely apologize, or my parents would admit what they did was wrong. But they never did. They were only sorry they got caught. That says more about them than about you. I know, it still hurts. She nodded. Good. Good? You haven't let revenge turn you cruel. You can still feel hurt, still feel sadness for what could have been. That means you're still human, still capable of compassion. That will make you a better ambassador than any amount of ruthlessness would. After she left, I stood at my window looking out over Lake Geneva. The water was blue and calm, the mountains in the distance capped with snow. I thought about the girl. I'd been 10 years ago, scared, betrayed, exiled. I thought about the woman I'd become, powerful, respected, free. My phone buzzed. A message from the UN Secretary General. Excellent work in Beijing. The Chinese government has requested that you lead a comprehensive anti-corruption initiative across all their economic ministries. It's a 3-year appointment. Interested? I smiled and typed back, very interested. 3 years later, I stood in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing, receiving a commendation from the President of China himself for my work on anti-corruption initiatives. The program I'd implemented had recovered over 2 billion yuan in stolen funds, led to hundreds of prosecutions, and fundamentally restructured how financial oversight operated in the government. My family wasn't there. They weren't invited. Elena was in her 8th year of a 20-year sentence. She'd lost weight, I'd heard, lost her looks. She worked in the prison laundry and wrote letters of appeal that were systematically denied. My father had been forced to declare bankruptcy. He now lived in a small apartment in an unfashionable part of the city, working as a consultant for a minor import-export business. All the connections he'd spent a lifetime cultivating had evaporated once he couldn't offer them anything. My mother had aged dramatically. She'd developed health problems, stress-related, the doctors said. She lived with my father in that small apartment, a far cry from the sprawling estate she'd once presided over. I felt nothing when I thought about them. Not satisfaction, not sadness, just nothing. They were strangers who'd once had the power to hurt me. Now they had no power at all. After the ceremony, I had dinner with Minister Wang, who'd become a friend over the years. We sat in a private room at one of Beijing's finest restaurants, toasting the success of our anti-corruption program. You've changed China's economic landscape, he said. The work you've done here will influence policy for generations. We've changed it together. But it was your vision, your determination. He set down his glass. I've always wanted to ask, was it worth it? Coming back, facing your family, enduring the publicity? I thought about it, really thought about it. Yes, I said finally. Not because of the revenge, though that had its moments, but because I proved to myself that they didn't break me. They tried to destroy me, and instead I became something they never imagined possible. That's worth more than any vengeance. What will you do next? Your term here is ending. The Secretary General has offered me a position as Deputy Director of Economic Development. It's based in New York, a promotion. Will you take it? I think so. I've done what I came here to do. China doesn't need me anymore. He smiled. I think you're wrong about that. But I understand the desire to move forward. That night, I walked through Beijing alone, something I couldn't have done safely 10 years ago. The city had changed, cleaner, more modern, more prosperous. I'd changed too. The scared, betrayed girl who'd boarded a plane to London with nothing but a fabricated confession hanging over her head was gone. In her place was a woman who'd learned to turn betrayal into purpose, exile into opportunity, powerlessness into influence. I walked past the university where I'd studied, past the neighborhood where my family's estate had once stood, now replaced by a public park, past the Ministry of Commerce where Elena had stolen millions. And I felt free. The next morning, I went to one place I'd been avoiding, the National Cemetery where my grandmother was buried. She'd died while I was in exile, and I hadn't been able to attend the funeral. She was the only family member who'd ever truly loved me, who'd seen me as more than just Elena's disappointing younger sister. I knelt at her grave and placed fresh flowers. I'm sorry I wasn't here, I said softly. I'm sorry I didn't get to say goodbye. But I hope you're proud of who I became. I hope you know that I never gave up, never let them break me. I hope you can see that I proved you were right. I was always stronger than they thought. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment I could almost hear her voice. My brilliant granddaughter, I always knew you'd do great things. I stayed there for an hour, telling her everything, the exile, the struggle, the triumph, the justice. I told her about Elena's conviction, about our parents' downfall, about the career I'd built from nothing. And I told her about the girl I'd left behind, the one who'd believed that family was everything, that being good and quiet and obedient would earn love. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who understood that sometimes the family you choose, colleagues, friends, mentors, matters more than the family you're born into. When I finally stood to leave, I felt lighter than I had in years. 10 years after leaving China in disgrace, I left again. This time on my own terms, with my head held high, with accolades and accomplishments, and a future that was entirely mine. At the airport, a young woman approached me nervously. She was maybe 22, clutching a well-worn copy of an article I'd written about overcoming adversity in diplomatic careers. Ambassador Chen? She asked. I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to thank you. Your story about what your family did, how you survived it, it helped me. My own family is difficult, abusive, really. I thought I was trapped. But reading about how you escaped and built something amazing, it gave me hope. I took her hand. You're not trapped. It might feel like it now, but you have more power than you think. Use it. Build something they can't touch. Will I ever stop being angry? I thought about Elena in prison, my parents in their tiny apartment, the years of bitterness I'd saw carried like armor. The anger fades, I said. It becomes something else, strength maybe, purpose. Eventually, you realize that the best revenge isn't hurting them. It's building a life so full and meaningful that they become irrelevant. That's when you've truly won. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you. After she left, I boarded my flight to New York. First class, paid for by the UN. My seat had my name engraved on a small plaque. Ambassador Yue Chen, Deputy Director of Economic Development. I settled in, accepted a glass of champagne from the flight attendant, and opened my laptop to review documents for my new position. My phone buzzed one final time before I put it in airplane mode. An email from Professor Liu with the subject line, "You should see this." I opened it. There was a link to a news article. Former Ministry Director Elena Chen denied parole again, deemed high risk for reoffending. Below the link, Professor Liu had written, "Justice continues to be served. Your grandmother would be proud." I closed the email and looked out the window as the plane began to taxi. Beijing disappeared below us, the sprawling city where I'd been born, betrayed, and ultimately vindicated. I thought about the woman I'd been and the woman I'd become, about the family that had destroyed me and the life I'd built from the ruins, about revenge and justice and the thin line between them. And I realized I didn't need their apologies anymore. I didn't need their acknowledgement or their regret. They'd given me the greatest gift of all, though they'd never intended it. They'd forced me to become strong enough to survive without them. 10 years after they'd sent me overseas to clear Elena's scandal, I'd returned as an ambassador, but I hadn't just returned to them. I'd returned to a life beyond them, a legacy that had nothing to do with their name, a future that was entirely, completely, triumphantly mine. That was justice. That was freedom. That was victory. The plane rose into the sky, carrying me toward my new life. Behind me, China receded into memory. Ahead, the world waited, full of possibilities, opportunities, and a future that no one could take away. I'd been sent away as a scapegoat, as the expendable daughter, as the girl no one thought would matter. I'd returned as someone they couldn't ignore, couldn't control, couldn't break. And now I was leaving again, but this time on my own terms. This time I was free.